This week, there were 2 arrests, finally a break in the case 25 years later. Paul Flores and his father Ruben were both arrested in connection to the disappearance of Kristin Smart. Welcome to Left Undone, Incomplete Investigations. I'm Catherine. Hi, and welcome back. This week, there was a press conference and 2 arrests. Paul Flores, 44, of San Pedro, California, and his father, Ruben Flores, were both arrested in connection with the Kristin Smart case. Kristin Smart was a 6-foot, 1-inch blonde young woman at the prime of her life. It was Memorial Weekend, May 1996. On that Friday, Kristin called her mother, her family home, and she got voicemail. She left a message and said, good news, I will talk to you on Sunday. Little did they know that would be the last time they would ever hear from Kristin. On Friday, May 24th, Kristin went to a party. The party was at sort of an unofficial fraternity house just feet away from the campus of Cal Polytech in San Luis Obispo. She had one of her friends drop her off, some friends drop her off. Her friend Margarita dropped her off, and she was kind of, according to Margarita, Kristin was a little bit like, pissed, I guess, kind of a little perturbed that Margarita wasn't going to come to the party with her. But Margarita said, be careful. Last Margarita ever saw of Kristin. Kristin went in this party, and, it was a let your hair down kind of weekend. It was Memorial Weekend. She's a college student, was at this party, enjoying herself. Now, there's different people say different things about the fact if Kristin was drinking or not. Some people say she was completely intoxicated, and other people say no, she'd never even had a drink. There is speculation that possibly someone drugged her, slipped her a date rape type drink. Who knows? Because Kristin has never been found, so nobody can do any postmortem or autopsy on her because her body's never been found. Well, Paul Flores apparently was at this party as well. About 2 a.m., Tim Davis was leaving the party, and he saw Kristin passed out on the lawn. He got her up along with Cheryl Anderson, and they proceeded to walk Kristin back to her dorm. As they were walking, they were approached by Paul Flores, who joined them to take the walk back to the dorms as well. When they got to the dorm area, Tim lived off campus, so he took off. He left Paul and Cheryl and Kristin there. One thing that Cheryl did notice while they were walking back, that Kristin kind of kept stopping along the way, and she thought that Paul's behavior was really odd. And when she waited for them to catch up to her, she noticed that Paul's arms were around Kristin's waist and Kristin's arms were around his neck. Later, Paul would say that, yeah, that's what he was trying to keep her warm. She was freezing. Now, as they were getting ready to go, Cheryl was like, do you got her? Because I can take her. If you can't take her, this is according to her Cheryl's deposition. I can take her if you can't take her. And she said in her deposition she didn't really want to take her, but she would have if she had to. And Paul took responsibility and said, no, I'll take her. Paul and Kristin left, and that was the last time Cheryl saw them. Paul says they got to their separate pathways where one would go one way, one would go the other way, and that's where they parted ways, and he watched her go away. That was his story. Unfortunately, Paul was the last person to ever see Kristin alive, and his stories are funky. They don't completely match up, and there's a lot of really suspicious stuff that went on with this case. But it dragged on for 25 years. According to Paul, they parted ways. She went to her dorm, he went to his, and that was it. That Sunday, so that was 2 a.m. or about 2:30 a.m. when they parted ways, because Tim had found her at 2 a.m. They parted ways about 2:30 a.m. when Paul says he went his way, she went her way. So it was early Saturday morning by this point. At that point, Sunday rolled around and Kristin's mom did not hear from her, but she thought, well, was not really weird because it was a 3-day weekend and Kristin was probably just doing her thing and she'd probably hear from her, Monday. That was not really super suspicious to Denise, Kristin's mom. Kristin's parents are Denise and Stan Smart. Kristin was born on February 20th, 1977. She is the oldest of 3 children in the Smart family. Kristin's mom says she was adventurous and she had a smile that would light up a room. She was very kind to her siblings. She would work out the differences between them if there was a sibling squabble. And she was like the peacemaker of the family between the kids. 2 days after the party, a neighbor in the dorm of Kristin's contacted the university police and said, we don't know where Kristin is. The university police did not report this to law enforcement or her family. And the neighbor went on eventually and called San Luis Obispo Sheriff's Department and reported that Kristin seemed to be missing. And she also contacted the Smarts. Now on Monday, Memorial Day, May 27th, Denise, Kristin's mom's phone rang. And it was the university police saying, is Kristin with you? Is she with her family this weekend? So according to the FBI, the university police actually didn't take the missing persons report until the 28th, 3 days after Kristin was last seen. Now, if you follow true crime, we know that the first 48 hours is extremely crucial. And Denise Smart has made comments that she didn't get full support of law enforcement and she felt like there was a lot of mistakes made early on that really hurt her chances of ever being able to find Kristin. Crystal Calvin was Kristin's roommate at the dorm, and she said none of Kristin's items were missing. Her ID was there, her personal belongings were there, her clothes were there. Nothing was missing, as if she just disappeared. It didn't look like she packed to go away anywhere. There is a California penal code that says that the university, basically in layman's terms, the university police are supposed to alert the local police department if anything like this were to happen. And they're supposed to report missing persons, any kind of crime like that occurs on campus, even runaways, in a timely manner. So people have criticized the Cal Poly Police Department. They didn't reach out for help from other local law enforcement agencies. In 1998, the Kristin Smart Campus Safety Act was put into law. Her parents really lobbied and worked hard to get this law placed, which protects people like Kristin if there were something to go on, that there actually is a requirement in the law that they are reported immediately. It clarifies the operational responsibilities of the local law enforcement and the campus police, etc. And the reason that they really were adamant about getting this done is because they wanted to protect people like Kristin, to change the system. Now, during the investigation, Kristin's father was traveling 250 miles back and forth. Every lead, anything, somebody said they saw her, he would get in the car and drive, and Kristin's mom, Denise, stayed home by the phone in case there was news or that Kristin showed up. So on May 30th, the university police actually interviewed Flores and asked him to tell them about what happened when he last saw Kristin. And basically he just said, yeah, she went that way, I went that way, and that was it. Never saw her again. Paul wasn't even doing well academically. He wound up dropping out of the college shortly after Kristin disappeared. Paul Flores actually had a record before Kristin disappeared. In December of 1995, a young woman called the police at 1 a.m. complaining that Paul Flores was on her balcony and wouldn't leave. But of course, by the time the police got there, he was gone. He also has 4 DUIs. His first DUI was before Kristin disappeared in 1996, March. His second, third, and fourth DUIs were in 1999, 2000, and 2005. Now, during his interview with the police on May 30th, he had a black eye. And they asked him where he got the black eye from. And Paul says, oh, I got it playing basketball. And the police were like, okay. Well, Later, they interviewed the people he played basketball with, and one of the guys they interviewed said, no, that black eye was there when we played basketball. It was already there, and he said, I remember asking him about it, how'd you get the black eye? And he said, oh, I just woke up with the black eye. So clearly he lied twice already. And he said, oh yeah, I just woke up with the black eye. I just woke up that way. Because we all just wake up with black eyes. We punch ourselves in the eye. I don't know. How do you wake up with a black eye? So about a month later, on June 19th, Paul was brought in for questioning again. And again, they asked him about the black eye. He confessed, yes, I did lie about the black eye. And they said, well, how did you get the black eye? And Paul said, well, I got it because I was in my car at like 2 a.m. and I hit my eye on the steering wheel. And they said, what were you doing in your car at 2 a.m.? He said, oh, I was installing a new radio in my truck because I was going to sell it. They asked, well, why wouldn't you just tell us that in the first place? Why didn't you admit that you hit it on the steering wheel? And he goes, well, it's just one of those kind of stories that I didn't think anybody would believe that. The Smart family lawyer says, look, Kristin was seen at a party. She was last seen with Paul Flores, and he has injuries on his body that indicate some kind of altercation. Look at that. Looks pretty guilty to me. And he lied about what happened. More than a month after Kristin's disappearance, cadaver dogs were brought into the dorm. And they were each separately brought into the hall where Paul had been living, Santa Lucia Hall, and Paul's room was 128. Now, each of these dogs were separately brought into the hall, and each of them hit on that room. And specifically, each of them hit on a mattress in that room, and it was Paul's mattress. And the reason why they knew that it was Paul's mattress is because Paul told him which one was his mattress earlier. So all 4 cadaver dogs hit on that mattress, which indicates that there was a dead body at some point, either murdered there or put there for a while. The people that have the cadaver dogs actually said decomposition starts immediately. The physiology of the body changes immediately when someone dies, and the dogs can pick up on that change. The university police said, no, we don't have anything that indicates this. But they did wind up taking that mattress for evidence. And let's hope that there is some DNA or something on there that they can get. Boy, wouldn't that be awesome. Paul Flores went in for a deposition, and they asked him all kinds of questions, and Paul refused to answer. All he would say over and over again, except he gave his name, all he would say over and over again was, on the advice of my attorney, I refuse to answer the question based on the 5th Amendment of the United States Constitution.
In addition, the oath that has been administered to you by the court reporter is the same oath that would be administered to you in a court of law, as if there were a judge present. And attached to the oath process is the penalty of prosecution for perjury should you lie under oath. Do you understand that admonition as to perjury? And I want to ask you some questions. Are you under the influence of any medication which at this time would interfere with your ability to give clear and accurate testimony today?
On the advice of my attorney, I refuse to answer that question based on the 5th Amendment of the United States Constitution.
Do you understand the difference between an estimate and a guess?
Yes.
I'd like to ask you what documents you have reviewed in preparation for your deposition testimony here today.
On the advice of my attorney, I refuse to answer that question based on the 5th Amendment of the United States Constitution.
Have you reviewed certain documents in preparation for your deposition testimony here today?
On the advice of my attorney, I refuse to answer that question based on the 5th Amendment of the United States Constitution.
For the record, I would indicate that the witness is repeatedly looking at and having his attention directed by Mr. Delamotte to an 8.5 inch by 11 inch piece of white paper with some black lettering which is upside down, and I can't read it from here, but I think I know what it says because the witness has read it into the record on a number of occasions. I would ask that a copy of that document that the witness has been reviewing be attached as an exhibit to this deposition and incorporated into the record. I would like to ask you a series of questions. Did you report your '85 Nissan truck stolen in San Diego recently?
On the advice of my attorney, I refuse to answer that question based on the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution.
In May of '96, were you a student at Cal Poly?
On the advice of my attorney, I refuse to answer that question based on the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution.
Please provide me with the employment positions that you have held since you started high school.
On the advice of my attorney, I refuse to answer that question based on the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution.
Are you presently employed?
On the advice of my attorney, I refuse to answer that question based on the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution.
And every question, what's your mother's name? Same answer about the Fifth Amendment. That was it. Wouldn't answer any questions in the deposition. Paul has been extremely uncooperative the entire 25 years. The former sheriff, Ed Williams, told the San Luis Obispo News that they had interviewed hundreds of people and every lead led them back to Paul Flores. He said there's no other suspects whatsoever. Years ago, the Smart family filed a wrongful death civil case against Paul Flores. But when it went to court, the judge said you can't do it at this point because it's still an open investigation. 25 years now of an open investigation. Paul Flores, his family, his mother, his father, sibling, they never spoke out publicly. Ironically, in the last month, there was a news media interview, and there's a raw interview, and I will put it in the link below with Paul Flores' mother. It's pretty interesting, and you should watch it.
Disappearance of a young woman, had happened until, I don't know, maybe, the campus police got involved, and originally, I guess they thought she was camping or whatever, I don't know. It was a lot of mixed, so we didn't really have any focus on it immediate. It came later.
At what point was that focus on you and your family and Paul?
Oh dear. It was a little while. We were, I don't know, a few weeks, a month, I don't know. I don't really have a good handle on it.
And for the last 25 years, Paul has been, a person of interest in this case, named a suspect, recently or before that. What has that been like for you guys as a family to be under a magnifying glass?
It's a good way of putting a magnifying glass, and with a lot of people out there watching, and of course sentiment is, of course, our sentiment too. Everybody wants a resolution, so they just want to focus where they want to focus on. And there's been a lot of media, and now there's Facebook and whatever else you got out there. I don't know. I'm not really too savvy.
But pertaining to you, how do you feel with all of this, or how have you
Well,
felt?
we have been harassed. We've had a restraining order. We've had Mr. and Mrs. Smart's henchmen put in jail for harassing us, stalking us. And when I say us, I mean Ruben and I mean Mike, my daughter, her husband, my son. We were all on the restraining order, protected. He violated the restraining order. He went to jail. And like I said, he was their henchman.
And you're talking about who?
Dennis Mahan. And everything's on file, and there is a bench warrant out for his arrest. And so I don't believe he will come back to California.
On July 12th, 1996, Paul Flores' roommate, his dorm room roommate, was interviewed. And his name is Derek C., TSE. He was asked if he knew anything or if Paul had said anything to him about Kristin. And he said, well, I did ask him at one point where Kristin was. And Paul said, oh, yeah, she's at my mom's house having lunch with her right now. And then it came up again at some point, and the roommate said to Paul, you killed her and you drug her body out. And Paul said, yep, and I put her at my mom's house and she's still there. Now, what's interesting about that, there is a lot of speculation that he did bury her in a planter in his mom's home, outside in the ground of his mom's home. At the time of Kristin's disappearance, Paul's mom was living at 529 East Branch Street in Aurora Grande. So that would be the house where he's referring to. And to tell his roommate twice that Kristin was there. This is Susan Flores' house when the sheriff's department did serve a search warrant on it. Now, in October of 1996, renters moved in there. And it was really interesting because they did find an earring that matched the necklace that Kristin was wearing in one of the billboards, but they turned it over to police, but somehow it got misplaced. Then the woman, Mary, that was renting the house, kept hearing this beep, beep, beep early in the morning and couldn't figure out where it was coming from. She finally figured out it was coming from outside, but the backyard was mostly cement except for some planters, and she felt like it was coming down below these planters. She would hear this beep, beep, beep. Well, it finally stopped, but when Chris Lambert of the podcast Your Own Backyard told Kristin's mom, Denise, about this, she was like, oh my gosh, Kristin's watch was always set for 5 a.m. because she had to get up and go to the pool for swimming at 5 a.m. at the university. So really pretty freaky and interesting that her body clearly has that her body really could be underneath that planter with this kind of activity, beeping sound and earring found on that property. On May 25th, 2002, 6 years after Kristin disappeared, she was actually declared dead legally. Now, Ian Parkinson, the current sheriff of San Luis Obispo, he was actually a police officer in San Luis Obispo when Kristin disappeared. And he never would have thought that this many years later, he would be part of this investigation in such a huge way. He also hired an investigator in this case that was actually a student at Cal Polytech when Kristin disappeared. So it has a personal sort of feel to it in relation with these investigators to get this thing solved. Now, Denise and Stan were really happy to have the new sheriff, Ian Parkinson. They felt like the previous sheriffs did not do what they should have with this case. So they had a very positive feeling for Ian Parkinson. Denise said, losing a child and having no one of authority on your side is just unimaginable. She said she was very frustrated with the case. She said sometimes 2 years would go by without any kind of contact from the investigation. And Parkinson actually met with the Smart family before he was elected into office to establish a relationship with them. Paul Flores' mom actually, and her boyfriend, actually had the nerve to bring a lawsuit against the Smarts for causing them to have emotional stress during this whole thing. I mean, how insensitive. Their child's not missing. Their child's a suspect. But the Smarts were missing their child. They never saw her again after your son was the last person to see him, and they're having an emotional breakdown over this. I mean, and to sue them, that's just so, In 2019, several new witnesses were interviewed, and this actually led to the police department being able to secure some search warrants against Paul. With this search warrant, they were able to intercept Paul's cell phone and text messages. In February of 2020, a year ago, 4 more search warrants were served. 1 was served in Los Angeles, 1 in the state of Washington, and 2 in San Luis Obispo. Investigators say these search warrants were for very specific items.
Caught Paul Flores leaving his home in San Pedro this morning. It did not appear any search was taking place there. The sheriff's office says the only search being done was at the property in Arroyo Grande. 44-year-old Flores is currently out on bail. He was arrested last month in Southern California on suspicion of being a felon in possession of a firearm. The sheriff's office says that arrest was a result of search warrants that were served last year in connection with the case.
In April of 2020, evidence from the previous search warrants gave investigators enough evidence to obtain another search warrant for Paul's home. And during that search, investigators said they did find evidence related to the Smart case. As recent as February 2021, Paul was arrested for a weapons charge.
There is a major update in the 1996 cold case disappearance of Kristin Smart.
Law enforcement arrested Paul Flores, seen here in older video. Yesterday, there he is on a weapons charge connected to search warrant served last year. Flores was the last person to be seen with Smart after the pair left a Cal Poly San Luis Obispo college party roughly 25 years ago. Smart's body has never been found despite 2 decades of searches and sizable rewards seeking information.
Now, in March, just last month, more search warrants were served. A search warrant was served at Paul's father's home, Ruben Flores, in Aurora Grande. Ruben Flores is 80 years old and he's Paul's father. They came in with cadaver dogs and ground-penetrating radar. During this search, they obtained even more evidence. On April 13, 2021, a judge signed 2 more warrants and 2 arrest warrants for Paul and for his dad. Paul was living in Los Angeles County and his father in San Luis Obispo County. Both were taken into custody simultaneously. Paul was charged with murder, no bail, of Kristin, and his father is being charged with accessory after the fact. So did he help him hide the body? It's going to be a really interesting court case, but the prosecution already, the DA has spoken, the Sheriff's Department has spoken, and they feel that they have a solid case to move forward and prosecute him to the furthest extent of the law. So that hopefully gets you up to date. We will keep an eye on this story and follow it throughout the court system. And thank you for watching Left Undone. If you're new here, please subscribe. If you've been around for a while, don't forget to hit that like button, and I will see you soon. I'm Catherine. Thank you for being here. Stay safe. Stay well. Bye-bye.